Hey guys, it's me, Jack24 here. Today I'm going to be reacting to the Mexican-American War explained by Knowledgia. Knowledgia? However you pronounce it. Anyways, I decided to so I'm basically deciding to react to a couple of history videos, since I have a feeling that these would help me get back into the habit of making longer videos, as typically reactions usually do, and which is something that I'm just trying to get back into the habit of doing, which is not going to be that difficult. Oh, that's right. Tomorrow's Yom Kippur. So happy Yom Kippur, everyone. I guess that this is a little bit of an early message for that. Why did it all of a sudden zoom in on it? Excuse me as I fix my computer. There we go. Anyways, all copyright belongs to Knowledgia. An original link to the video is in the description. And let's begin. Only my computer would do. You so?
The Mexican-American War. It is the year of 1830. Even though Mexico got its independence some years earlier in
Mexico is quite large. I mean, like, back then. Quite honestly, I forgot that Mexico did have what would essentially become Utah and Colorado. Colorado, along with Nevada, New Mexico, California. I always forget about that.
Spain after a revolution and an armed conflict which lasted over
Give me a sec. Sorry about this.
a revolution and an armed conflict which lasted over a decade. The country was in total chaos. Looking at the map of that time, we can see a larger Mexico than the one we know today. A
Yep.
stretched country, one of the biggest at that time. The newly independent nation was in dire straits after 11 years of war. No plans or guidelines were established by the revolutionaries, so
Give me a sec.
newly independent nation was in dire straits after 11 years of war. No plans or guidelines were established by the revolutionaries, so internal struggles for control of a government ensued. Mexico suffered a complete lack of funds to organize a country of around 4.5 million square kilometers. At that time, Mexico faced the threats of emerging internal rebellions and of invasion by Spanish forces from their base in Cuba.
Sorry that my things keep glitching out. Just give me a sec. Because I'm just gonna see if maybe charging my computer is the issue. Or not charging it. Give me a sec. Give me a second. Sorry about that. And there we go. Hopefully it should be working.
Rebellions and of invasion by Spanish forces from their base in nearby Cuba. This government was characterized by instability, and it was ill-prepared for international conflict when war with the Americans broke out only 2 decades later in 1846. The United States was in expansion, and the country was much bigger than it was when it became independent. The United States of America expanded deeper into the Native American territories, and they purchased the huge Louisiana Territory from the French. Although the country was expanding, there was an opportunity for more. Due to Mexico's internal problems,
Oh no. Well, I see an ad's going to be coming up. So, excuse the ad.
several regions rebelled.
I really hate these ads.
What is it? You don't know what this is?
No, I'm sorry, I don't need to see you, James Bond. Although it is nice to see movies back in the movie theaters. Anyways, I'm just going to back that up by 5 seconds. Before that, before that annoying ad decided to play.
Due to Mexico's internal problems, several regions rebelled and tried to break away. Texas gained its independence from Mexico in 1836. Initially,
Oh yeah, I forgot that Texas was its independent country at some point. So was Vermont. But yet no one remembers that.
the United States declined to incorporate it into the Union, largely because Northern political interests were against the addition of a new slave state. The Mexican government was also encouraging border raids and warning that any attempt at annexation would lead to war, since the Mexicans still considered Texas as part of their land. Nonetheless, annexation procedures were quickly initiated after the 1844 election of Polk, who campaigned that Texas should be re-annexed and that the Oregon Territory should be reoccupied.
Yeah, I forgot that Polk was the last expansionist. Well, last great president before Lincoln. Because he did gain practically all of this territory from Texas to California to basically Washington. He gained all that territory in just one term of office.
Polk also had his eyes on California, New Mexico, and the rest of what is today the U.S. Southwest. Looking to expand, Polk offered to purchase those lands, but the offer was rejected, and soon after, he instigated conflict by moving troops in disputed
Hold on. I just need to do this.
offer was rejected, and soon after, he instigated conflict by moving troops into a disputed zone between the Rio Grande and Nueces River that both countries had previously recognized as part of the Mexican state of Coahuila. The tension grew more and more over the dispute.
Well, I mean, there's also a side from the Americans that depict that this could be completely of a word-based origin rather than other stuff, but for the time being that some Americans, or at least some of the American troops and guards going there. I'm not sure if it was all of them that were aware about it, but I know only some were, or maybe all. I could be mistaken about that. But I did know that they went into disputed territory, but what I didn't but what most of them probably didn't know, because I have a feeling that some probably knew that this was disputed territory, but it kind of was weird.
Lands. Texas was annexed by the United States on December 29, 1845, and became the 28th state. However, the United States inherited the southern and western border dispute with Mexico, which had refused to recognize Texas's independence or the U.S.'s offers to purchase the territory. Thus, through this act, the tensions between the two countries transformed into a war. On April 25, 1846, Mexican cavalry attacked a group of U.S. soldiers in the disputed zone under the command of General Zachary Taylor, killing about a dozen. They then laid siege to an American fort along the Rio Grande. Taylor called in reinforcements, was able to defeat the Mexicans at the battles of Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. Following those battles, Polk told the U.S. Congress that the cup of forbearance had been exhausted, even before Mexico passed the boundary of the United States, invaded our territory, and shed American blood upon American soil. On May 13th, Congress declared war, while no official declaration of war ever came from Mexico.
Hold on a sec, I'm about to get an ad.
I absolutely love teaching. I just wish I had more time to prepare fun lessons, especially.
No. I'm sorry, but I keep getting those annoying ads. It always just bugs me. Since I just don't want to view the ads. To be fair, To be fair, who really does? And I'm too lazy to get YouTube Premium, even though all my friends beg me to get it.
Congress declared war, while no official declaration of war ever came from Mexico. In terms of how the war began, the situation is debatable. We have an ill-prepared Mexico with internal revolts and an emerging power that looks to expand more and more. Mexico was weaker, but the U.S. did not want to look like a bully. Even so, Ulysses S. Grant, who had opposed the war but served as an Army lieutenant in Taylor's army, claims in his personal memoirs that the main goal of the U.S. Army's advance from the Nueces River to the Rio Grande was to provoke the outbreak of war without attacking first, to debilitate any political opposition to the war.
And remember this, Ulysses S. Grant was also a famous... Sorry about that. Was also a famous general, not to mention a future president of the United States. Granted, Grant actually did an incredible job during the Civil War, not only kicking out the Southerners out of the Confederacy, but giving General Robert E. Lee a run for his money, considering both of them were equally respected generals during that time. No, still are now, but debatable on Robert E. Lee due to modern day scenarios and views on stuff that was sort of alright back then, but not alright now. Hey, I'm just a messenger. Don't shoot any angry comments at me. I'm just a messenger. Come on, why won't this play?
After Mexican independence, there was a man, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, a controversial character who in the first place didn't support Mexican independence from Spain, but then fought in support of it. He then backed the monarchy of the Mexican Empire, then revolted against the emperor, and then supported a republic. The country tried to find its path, and these shocks led to more trouble and weakness over time. Santa Anna served 12 non-consecutive presidential terms over a period of 22 years. After the U.S. declared war on Mexico and
Just give it a sec to fill in. Because I will go back every now and then just to do this.
terms over a period of 22 years. After Mexico in 1846, an internal coalition including forced-out President Mariano Paredes sought a return to a federal republic with Santa Anna as the president. He wrote a letter to Mexico City stating he did not care to return to the presidency, but would like to come out of exile in Cuba to use his military experience to reclaim Texas for Mexico. President Valentin Gomez Farias, driven to desperation, accepted the offer and allowed Santa Anna. What was unknown for the current President Farias is that Santa Anna is secretly dealing with U.S. representatives to sell all contested territory to the U.S. at a reasonable price, on the condition that he be allowed back in Mexico through the U.S. naval blockades.
Oh yeah, and I forgot that the US did a lot of Navy blockades. Why do I always get these mobile game apps? I'm literally not on any mobile service. I'm literally on a computer, for crying out loud. Excuse me for a sec.
And so,
Just gonna back that up about here.
for the current President Farias is that Santa Anna has been secretly dealing with U.S. representatives to sell all contested territory to the U.S. at a reasonable price, on the condition that he be allowed back in Mexico through the U.S. naval blockades. And so Santa Anna returned to Mexico, taking his place at the head of the army. Once in this powerful position, he went back to his word, declaring himself president and prepared to fight off the U.S. forces' invasion. The Americans achieved 2 victories at the Battle of Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. General Stephen Watts Kearny and his troops started to advance in the disputed territory and in New Mexico. The American troops encountered no
Just gonna back that up just a tiny bit.
troops started to advance in the disputed territory and in New Mexico. The American troops encountered no Mexican forces when they arrived on August 15th. They entered Santa Fe and claimed the New Mexico territory for the United States without a single shot being fired. Kearny declared
Well,
himself the military governor of the new.
I mean, that was lucky. Taking over a piece of territory without a single shot fired. It is quite lucky. Just gonna have to back that up due to my computer lagging.
In New Mexico, the American troops encountered no Mexican forces when they arrived on August 15th. They entered Santa Fe and claimed the New Mexico territory for the United States without a single shot being fired. Kearny declared himself the military governor of the new territory on August 18th, and he established a civilian government. A temporary legal system was created, now known today as the Kearny Code. Kearny set out for California on September 25, 1846. In December of 1846, after the successful conquest of New Mexico, parts of Kearny's Army of the West moved into modern-day northwest Mexico. They were led by Alexander Doniphan, continuing what ended up being a year-long 5,500-mile campaign. But in the territory, a rebellion happened, known as the Taos Revolt. There were multiple separate skirmishes, but
I'm sorry that I'm not pausing on and talking. Just that I'm very interested in what the video is saying. Since even I don't know much stuff about the Mexican-American War, and this is quite interesting to me.
U.S. military moved quickly to subdue the revolt. Meanwhile, the commander of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Squadron, John D. Sloat, had received orders to seize San Francisco Bay and blockade California port. Captain John C. Fremont, leading a U.S. topographical expedition to survey the Great Basin, entered the Sacramento Valley in December 1845. Fremont's party was at Upper Klamath Lake.
Just gonna have to do this real quick.
December 1845. Fremont's party was at Upper Klamath Lake, Oregon Territory, when it received words that war between Mexico and the U.S. was imminent. The party then returned to California. On Sloat's orders, Fremont brought 160 volunteers to Monterey, in addition to the California Battalion. On July 15th, Sloat transferred his command of the Pacific Squadron to Commodore Robert F. Stockton, who was more militarily aggressive. General Castro and Governor Pio Pico wrote farewells and fled separately to the Mexican state of Sonora. Stockton's army entered Los Angeles unopposed on August 13th. At that point, he sent a report to the Secretary of State that California is entirely free from Mexico.
Hold on a sec. Give me a sec. Just gonna annoyingly do this again.
Los Angeles unopposed on August 13th. At that point, he sent a report to the Secretary of State that California is entirely free from Mexican dominion. Meanwhile, U.S. Colonel Stephen W. Kearny had performed a march across New Mexico and the Sonoran Desert and crossed the Colorado River in late November 1846. On December 7th, 100 Lancers under General Andres Pico, brother of the governor, fought Kearny's army of about 150 at the Battle of San Pascual. The wounded Kearny pushed on until he had to establish a defensive position on a hill. General Pico kept the hill under siege until a 215-man American relief force arrived. A 600-man American force under Kearny began a 150-mile march to Los Angeles. On January 8, 1846, the Stockton-Kearny Army defeated the Mexican force in the 2-hour Battle of Rio San Gabriel. The Treaty of Cahuenga was signed, which marked the end of armed resistance in...
Hold on. Oh no, there's an ad there. Just give it a sec.
The army defeated the Mexican force in the 2-hour Battle of Rio San Gabriel. The Treaty of Cahuenga was signed, which marked the end of armed resistance in California. The conflict.
Oh, that's good for California, considering last I checked, California is going to be the next state to join the U.S.
Continued
Give.
elsewhere.
Hold on a sec. There it is.
If you have a phone anywhere in the room right now, in your hands or on your desk, wherever, check this video out. This iPhone right here emits harmful levels of EMF radiation. Here is an EMF radiation detector. So, multiple studies have shown that EMF radiation can cause disturbances in your sleep, headaches, depression, fatigue, lack of concentration.
No, excuse me. I'm trying to watch a video about a war. Not about tech. Just have to back it up there. Sorry once again. And also, I really hate getting ads during these videos, considering now I know that my videos are being filled with ads, and to be honest, that's kind of annoying, considering I hate.
Rio San Gabriel. The Treaty of Cahuenga was signed, which marked the end of armed resistance in California. The conflict continued elsewhere. The Mexican army's defeats at Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma caused even more political turmoil in Mexico. Led by Zachary Taylor, 2,300 U.S. troops crossed the Rio Grande and proceeded.
Hold on a sec. Just have to do this. Sorry once again.
2,300 U.S. troops crossed the Rio Grande and proceeded south. The hard-fought Battle of Monterrey resulted in serious losses on both sides. The Mexican forces were under General Pedro de Ampudia, and they repulsed Taylor's best infantry. American soldiers were not familiar with urban warfare. They marched straight down the open streets and were brought.
Excuse me for a sec.
The best infantry. American soldiers were not familiar with urban warfare.
Well, I mean, we will be soon by the time of World War I and by time of World War II. Not so much during the Vietnam War. Well, sort of, but just consider the urban sense actually being a jungle, not a town.
Marched straight down the open streets and were caught by surprise by well-hidden Mexican defenders. Even though the Mexicans repulsed the Americans, General Taylor created an 8-week armistice with the Mexican army, allowing them to evacuate in return for the surrender of the city. Under pressure from Washington, Taylor broke the armistice and occupied the city of Saltillo. On February 22, 1847, Santa Anna personally marched north to fight General Taylor with 20,000
This is going to be an interesting fight.
men. The 4,600 Americans had entrenched at a mountain pass called Buena Vista. The Mexicans suffered desertions on the way north and arrived with 15,000 men in a tired state. Knowing that his numbers were still superior, he demanded the surrender of the U.S. Army, but was refused.
Yep, as people might know or not know, that when it comes to fighting, Americans are quite stubborn about it. Well, sort of about it. Unless I'm not going to say anything about the current situation in Afghanistan, but let's forget about it.
Thus, he attacked the next morning. Santa Anna flanked the U.S. by sending his cavalry and some infantry up the steep terrain that made up one side of the pass, while a division of infantry attacked frontally along the road leading to Buena Vista. Being superior in numbers, the Mexicans had nearly broken the American lines at several points, but suffered heavily from the American horse artillery. Even though the initial reports of the battle, as well as some propaganda news, credited victory to the Mexicans, instead of attacking the next day, Santa Anna retreated, having heard word of a rebellion and upheaval in Mexico City.
Wait, you left because you heard of a rebellion? I'm sorry, 007, but I must skip you. Go on. Come on. About here.
To the Mexicans, instead of attacking the next day, Santa Anna retreated, having heard word of a rebellion and upheaval in Mexico City.
That's not going to be that good. I mean, he practically just handed the Americans a free victory by default, including, let me just go back here, overwhelming the American forces here. Anyways, back to here. Yeah, leaving a battle just because they're revolting the country. Win the battle first before you return. Because let's face it, you don't want to make sure that you have internal enemies and external enemies, aka the US, and the internal ones fight each other at the same time. Anyways, let's continue.
Instead of attacking the next day, Santa Anna retreated, having heard word of a rebellion and upheaval in Mexico City. Some military historians agree that the U.S. Army probably would have been defeated if the Mexicans had gone through with their final attack.
Yeah, that actually does seem quite right, to be honest.
Important detail for the United States to have success in the war against Mexico was to secure its naval presence across Mexico's coasts. The U.S. Navy cleared the way for U.S. troops and supplies, especially to Mexico's main port of Veracruz. Even before hostilities began in the disputed northern region, the U.S. Navy had created a blockade. The U.S. president did not send reinforcements to Taylor's army for a continued advance. Instead, he sent a second army under General Winfield Scott. He transported to the port of Veracruz by sea to begin an invasion of the Mexican heartland. On March 9, 1847, Scott performs the first major amphibious landing in U.S. history in preparation for the siege of Veracruz. The city replied the best it could with its own artillery against the extended barrage, but because of the numerical superior force of the Americans, the Mexicans surrendered. The goal was obviously the capital. Scott marched westward towards Mexico City with almost 9,000 troops on April 2, 1847. Santa Anna had set up a defensive position around the main road about 50 miles northwest of Veracruz at Cerro Gordo. Santa Anna had entrenched with 12,000 troops and artillery that were trained on the road, where he expected Scott to appear and catch him by surprise. However, General Scott had sent 2,600 cavalry troops ahead. They reached the pass on April 12th, and the Mexican artillery fired upon them, revealing their positions. The Battle of Cerro Gordo started.
Some American tactics are to basically see where your enemy is, usually by sending some of your troops out first. And that didn't exactly work well in Vietnam, considering that the Americans were fighting were kind of in the jungle and were kind of very well camouflaged in.
Won the battle and continued their advance, even though the guerrillas harassed the American troops. With his remaining forces, General Winfield Scott advanced on Mexico City. The capital was laid upon by a series of battles around the right flank of the city defenses. After the American victories at the Battle of Contreras and Battle of Churubusco, peace negotiations started, which broke down on September 6, 1847. With the subsequent battles of Molino del Rey and Chapultepec and the storming of the city gates, the capital was occupied. Scott became military governor of occupied Mexico City. His victories in this campaign made him an American national hero. Desertion was a major problem for the Mexican army, depleting forces on the eve of battle. Most soldiers were peasants who had loyalty to their village and family, but not to the generals who had conscripted them, often hungry, ill, under-equipped, only partially trained, and never well paid. The soldiers were held in contempt by their officers and had little reason to fight the Americans.
Guess that made it easier for the Americans.
The
How am I getting that, dude?
had gone far beyond the territorial gains it envisioned by invading central Mexico with its dense population. The question was raised whether to annex Mexico itself, but many opposed this idea due to cultural.
Yeah. Along with the War of 1812, considering that if we actually did succeed with breaking down Canada or then Great Britain's territory of Canada, we might as well could have kept Canada's territory to ourselves. But the reason why why we couldn't or decided not to annex all of Mexico was, to be honest, we only wanted a certain set of areas, and we didn't want to start another civil war like thing.
Differences, overextension, and the huge instability this would cause. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gave the U.S. control of Texas, Alta California, and Nuevo Mexico. Those territories were organized in other states over time. In return, Mexico received $15 million, an approximation of just $443 million today, which was less than half the amounts the U.S. had attempted to offer Mexico before. The areas were populated, and that is probably the reason for such a low cost for the U.S. With Texas and the secession from Mexico, the U.S. gained more than 900,000 square miles of land. The Gadsden was enough.
Oh yeah, we have basically gave Arizona and part of New Mexico their final boarding
Acquisition for the United States and fixed the current border between Mexico and the USA.
Yep, and that was that. Anyways, once again, all copyright belongs to Knowledgia, and once again, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.